So, is the title a clickbait? Ooh, maybe. You'll have to watch the whole thing to find out. Hi, I know this video is going to be long, so let's make the introduction quick. I read Madame Bovary and I have some thoughts. Two disclaimers though, this video will contain no spoilers for the most part, and if there will be some spoilers, I will warn you beforehand and tell you to skip to this time. Second of all, I don't have an English degree or any degree in literature. I just like talking about books and I feel like Madame Bovary gets a bad rap, so I've decided to make a video. So let's backtrack a little bit. Before I read this book, my expectations were very low. First of all, the ratings are good on Goodreads are very low. It's like 3.71. I mean, it's not super low, but it kind of makes you raise an eyebrow and think this might not be that good. And when I scrolled through friends' reviews, it was 2-star, 3-star, 2-star, 3-star. So I wasn't expecting much. The second reason why I wasn't particularly looking forward to reading this book is because it does have infidelity in it. It's the main plot, and I thought I didn't like infidelity in books. I thought I couldn't like a book that had infidelity as kind of main plot point of the book. And I'm gonna be honest, I had a rough start. I remember reading the first chapter and absolutely hating it. I still stand by that, and I think it's one of the worst chapters I've ever read to a book, because it's we start with completely irrelevant scene and then jump to a different scene. You're what is going on? Who is the main character? I don't like it here. So in the end, I'm pretty sure the main reason why I didn't give this book 5 stars is because of the first chapter. I really don't think it was particularly good first chapter, and in the end I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. So as you can tell, I enjoyed this book overall, and I think that it's a very polarizing book, and I think to a certain degree it is misunderstood by people. So before I talk about why I think people dislike this book and why I personally ended up liking it, I will give you very brief background information. First about Gustave Flaubert himself and about the premise of the book. So, Gustave Flaubert, I'm not going to give you a whole biography. I can just tell you that Gustave Flaubert was a French author who was writing in the 19th century, and he was the first in France to start the kind of realist movement in literature. So Madame Bovary was published in 1857, and it is his most well-known book. And this book led to a trial on charges of the novel's immorality, so he had to go to court, but he escaped the conviction. But I think 6 months later another author was sentenced on the same kind of charges, so he barely escaped that. Fun fact, Flaubert never married and never wanted to have children. Most of what I'm about to say is going to be from his Wikipedia page. He said, when it comes to having children, that he would transmit to no one the aggravations and the disgrace of existence. And I gotta say, he must have been fun at parties. So when it comes to the writing style, which I personally really liked, he had a very precise writing style. Every word was deliberately chosen. He also hated cliches. On his Wikipedia page, yet again, it says that Flaubert believed in and pursued the principle of finding the right word, which he considered as a key means to achieve quality in literary art. And Walter Peter famously called Flaubert the martyr of style. A literary critic, James Wood, actually said that Flaubert's prose maintains an unsentimental composure and knows when to withdraw. And he actually compared his writing style to Defoe and Jane Austen and Balzac. So I think it's very interesting that he compared his writing style to Jane Austen. You will know later why. And it says that Flaubert was nearly equal parts romantic and realist. And after we have established that Flaubert was very particular about his writing style, I think we should talk about the importance of a good translation. So I have made a mistake of reading a bad translation. I started reading this book in Polish actually. I don't have the copy anymore because I actually got rid of it. But in case there are some people who are Polish who would like to read this book and are looking for a good translation, the best one is apparently by Ryszard Engelking. It is kind of hard to find this book in this translation, but you might find it used. When it comes to the English translations, I forgot to tell you, but I switched at some point to the audiobook that was in English, and that's how I realized that the Polish translation wasn't actually very good. The one that I've read from. So I switched to the audiobook and I really enjoyed it and kind of continued listening to the rest of it in English, and I think the translation that I was listening to was by Eleanor Marx Aveling, which I think is the original translation, and actually Eleanor Marx Aveling was a daughter of Karl Marx, the Karl Marx. But when it comes to best English translations of Madame Bovary, I heard that you should go for either the translation by Lydia Davis, so you can find it, like I will put on the screen like examples where you can find those translations. So the Lydia Davis translations you can find in Penguin Drop Caps, or with like the first letter of the surname of the author, or Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition, and the second good translation is Jeffrey Walls, and you can find this translation in Penguin Black Classics or Penguin Cloudbound. I mean, probably there are some other editions as well, but that's what I have found. I read online that the best, when it comes to Eleanor Marx Aveling, it's actually a good translation, but you should read the one that's revised by, who revised it? Paul Deman? Yeah. Revision of the translation that removes some of the like old-fashioned or inappropriate vocabulary. And when it comes to bad translations, there's Francis Stigmuller, and I think that's the one that's in the Evermans library. Also, I think it's in the vintage edition, that's the translator they went with. So Francis Stigmuller, apparently that's a bad translation. So if you haven't read Madame Bovary, the basic premise is Emma, who is a young, beautiful woman, marries Charles, who is this very mediocre country doctor, and they move to the countryside to live together, and she is very bored with her life. She reads a lot of kind of sentimental romantic novels, and she is disappointed that her life doesn't seem like what she has seen in those novels. So she is looking for passion, she's looking for excitement, and she looks for those things in affairs and excessive spending and other things. This is the like basic premise that you can find like anywhere. And you know, even the premise doesn't sound that exciting, but why I think you also might not like Madame Bovary. It is rather easy to hate Emma, technically. You know, aside from her infidelity, she's also rather shallow. She is, I guess, selfish. She has very unrealistic expectations of life. And her actions might be even more aggravating when you consider the fact that her husband, Charles, is actually a good person. Like, I do think that he really loved her. But, you know, to be fair, in the 19th century, if your husband wasn't like a violent alcoholic, he was a catch. So, you know, the bar was just very low. But here's kind of my whole thesis of this video. I think that whether or not you like Madame Bovary depends on whether you think that this book is a critique of Emma herself or the society that she lives in. And personally, I think it's the latter. I really don't think it is criticizing Emma or the kind of woman Emma is. But that being said, Gustave Flaubert does not make it easy to figure out where his intentions lie. He kind of balances between showing ridiculousness of some of Emma's actions and making us feel empathetic towards her. There's this kind of push and pull. Like, the second you feel angry or frustrated with Emma, he shows you kind of her good side. And I think he walks that line perfectly because he shows the complexity of human emotions and like people's motives very well. But it can be confusing because you're like, where is this going? What is he trying to say? And I have to say, throughout this book I was worried where all of this was going. There were times where Emma would complain about like women's position in the society. For example, she hoped for a son who would be strong and dark. She would call him George. And this idea of having a male child was like an expected revenge for all her impotence in the past. A man, at least, was free. He may travel over passions and over countries, overcome obstacles, taste of the most faraway pleasures. But a woman is always hampered. And I'm not sure if I can explain it very well, but I was worried that Flaubert was making all of these remarks to be just an excuse for her horrible actions. Like, just like another subtle irony, like look at her saying that she's a woman, that's why she's doing all of those stuff. And like that he was making fun of her through those kind of remarks. But in the end, I don't think that was the case. After I finished the novel, I knew that Flaubert wasn't fully making fun of Emma and that there was more to it, and I did think it was a critique of the society, but I needed to make sure. So I started looking into Flaubert's life to kind of figure him out as a person, which basically means I read his Wikipedia page. But first of all, I found out, this is all from Wikipedia, politically, Flaubert described himself as a romantic and liberal au deuce, an enraged liberal, a hater of all despotism, and someone who celebrated every protest of the individual against power and monopolies. There was also, at the back of some of the Penguin classics, there was this paragraph. Flaubert's erotically charged and psychologically acute portrayal of Emma Bovary caused a moral outcry on its publication in 1857. It was deemed so lifelike that many women claimed that they were the model for his heroine, but Flaubert insisted. Madame Bovary, c'est moi. I'm sorry for the terrible French, but it basically means Madame Bovary is me. Supposedly. Some people say he didn't say that, but it made me feel like there's no way he didn't feel empathetic towards Emma. And while he sometimes humorously was criticizing her actions with like subtle irony, in the end I don't believe he was condemning Emma. So let's talk about some more specific examples through which I think we can see the complexity of the story. I still think what I'm about to say isn't spoilery, but there is a part where I will get into like actual spoilers and I will tell you when, you know, you should skip ahead. So, first of all, why was Emma so disillusioned? Is this how you pronounce the word? Disillusioned? I don't know. But, you know, Flaubert points to the romantic novels. So, you know, when she confronted those ideas with reality, she was disappointed and honestly relatable. And while I was reading the book, that really reminded me of Catherine Morland from Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, because, you know, the main character of Northanger Abbey, Catherine, also is an avid reader of Gothic fiction. And the whole plot, I mean, Northanger Abbey is basically like a satire on Gothic fiction, and it kind of makes fun of Gothic fiction and makes fun even of Catherine. Jane Austen actually makes fun of Catherine herself a little bit, because she like sees like intrigue everywhere and she's like, oh my god, I'm going to this mansion, I bet it's haunted, I bet the owner of this mansion killed his wife. And just like, girl, no, this is real life. So, by the way, Northanger Abbey, very fun read. But the more I thought about it, I don't think that was the only similarity. I think Jane Austen herself, like I said, was kind of making fun of Catherine, and Northanger Abbey is actually the only, I believe this is the only book where Jane Austen herself comes in as kind of an author of her book and like comments on some events. I actually made a video about it where I rank all of Jane Austen's novels, so you can see it if you're interested. And I talked about it a little bit there. And that reminded me actually of Flaubert, because even though what Flaubert is doing is a lot more subtle, because Jane Austen actually, like in the first chapter, says that Catherine Morland is like a heroine of her novel, so it's a lot more apparent, while Flaubert is a little bit more subtle with his comments. But I think they both kind of look for the irony, you know, tease a little bit their main character, but they both do it in a way that doesn't, you know, like condemn the main character. It's not like they think the main character is a bad person, and I think they both had, you know, this like attachment to the main characters of those novels. So this is why I'm kind of trying to explain why I think overall Flaubert like, even though he might have like kind of sarcastically mocked Emma, I don't think he thought that Emma overall was a bad person. I don't know if any of what I just said made sense, but I hope it did. So, coming back to Madame Bovary, we have Charles, who is Emma's husband, and here's the thing. Charles was not a bad person, but Emma and Charles weren't exactly compatible. Like, there's this quote, "Charles' conversation was commonplace as a street pavement, and everyone's ideas trooped through it in their everyday garb, without exciting emotion, laughter, or thought." So it's not surprising that for Emma, who was so passionate and sentimental, Charles wasn't like a match made in heaven. He had no ambition. He was a very mediocre doctor with like no prospects for him to kind of advance his social position. And Emma hated mediocrity and hated her provincial life. So what could she do? She actually tried many things to kind of get more out of her boring life. She actually tried to be a good housewife for a while. That didn't make her happy. She tried immersing herself in religion, but that also didn't add meaning to her life. She then threw herself into excessive spending, so you know, consumerism. And last but not least, and I think this is what people focus on the most, she threw herself into infidelity. And I don't know, she tried so hard to find happiness. She wanted to get more out of life with the means that she had. And that's the problem. She didn't have much. Like, what else she had but her beauty and her body? Like, her body was the only form of currency that she possessed. Like, even at the beginning, her father, when he sensed that Charles was interested in Emma, he said, or thought, I'm not sure, "If he asks for her, I'll give her to him." Like a freaking table. Like, she was just an object. I mean, it's not surprising because at that time marriage was mostly a financial transaction and women a lot of the time didn't have much of a say in it. From now on I will get into more spoilery parts, so skip to this time if you don't want to be spoiled. So what we see in Madame Bovary is how her lovers actually have the power to change their life while she doesn't. We have Rudolph, who had the means to, you know, run away with her, but he abandoned her. We have Leon, who hates, you know, living in the countryside, just like Emma does, but he has the means to go to town to study law, to fulfill his dreams, while Emma doesn't have that. Even when she, you know, has her affairs, the power to actually change her life lies with the men she's with, and that's so frustrating. And I mean, in the end, Emma is responsible for her own actions, and I don't want to say that what she did was morally right, but I'm just saying it's complex, that her circumstances were complex, and honestly most of the time I couldn't help but pity her. Even when Emma was making stupid decisions, like, all I could say was, you know what, you go girl, fuck the society. And like, I knew what she was doing wasn't morally right, yet somehow this unyielding pursuit to find happiness was somehow brave. And I understand maybe that's a wrong thing to say, but to do that in a society that would judge her so much for it, that would, like, her actions could potentially bring her to complete ruin, and the consequences of her actions would, like, she would mostly feel the repercussions, not the men she was with. Knowing that, I don't know. All in all, I think Emma's actions derive from this deep need to get something more out of life while living in a society that holds her back in almost every possible way. And that's the tragedy, I think. So that's mostly the conclusion of this video, but I would like to mention a few more things that I liked about this book, just like in a regular review. I will not mention, like, there's so much to say about this book, and I'm pretty sure I already talked for quite a long while. So there's a few things that I will not mention. Things like symbols. Like, when you go to like SparkNotes, there's a whole like section about the symbolism of windows in Madame Bovary. I don't care. You probably don't care either. So not gonna talk about it. Another rather important theme in Madame Bovary is Flaubert's like criticism of the bourgeois, which is bourgeois was like a middle class in French society, and Flaubert was a part of bourgeois. But yeah, I think I would like to focus on some stuff that I just enjoyed about the book. So, even on Spark Notes you can see it. There's a part about inadequacy of language, and that's very interesting. The failure to communicate your thoughts and feelings. That's, I think, a big theme in Madame Bovary, and I really enjoyed it. There's a very famous quote that goes like this: "Whereas the truth is that fullness of soul can sometimes overflow in utter vapidity of language, for none of us can ever express the exact measure of his needs or his thoughts or his sorrows. And human speech is like a cracked kettle on which we tap crude rhythms for birds to dance to, while we long to make music that will melt the stars." Like, just this quote alone makes me want to reread this whole book. Another thing that I really enjoyed was the realism. I said before that, you know, Flaubert kind of started the realist movement in literature in France, and I really enjoyed it. There are parts that are just absolutely morbid and gut-wrenching. The book talks a lot about illness and death, and personally I found the portrayal of kind of medicine at that time and like doctors and pharmacists' work very interesting, but that's because I have like personal interest in like history and sociology of medicine, so I don't know if that would be interesting for everyone. But yeah, I also enjoyed the writing style. I really enjoyed his like subtle, sarcastic passages and his deep hatred towards cliches. I can appreciate that too. And yeah, overall I really enjoyed this book. My kind of final thought is that if you didn't like this book, I hope it's not because you read this book as this like straightforward moralizing story, because I think there's a lot of nuance in it. So that's where I'm going to leave you. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different to what I normally post, but yeah, I had fun preparing for this video, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it too, and see you next time. Bye!